I can still hear those words echoing in my mind, soft but sharp, like a knife wrapped in velvet. It was a rainy Tuesday evening, the kind where the sky hangs low and heavy, pressing down on everything below. I stood in our garage, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead, flickering just enough to make shadows dance on the concrete floor. My hands trembled as I stared at that cardboard box, taped shut with layers of duct tape, as if whatever was inside was fighting to get out. Or maybe it was me, fighting to keep my world from crumbling. David, my husband of 23 years, leaned against the workbench, his arms crossed, that familiar half-smile on his face, the one he used when he thought I was being dramatic. "Sarah, honey, it's just some old junk from work. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." His voice was calm, steady, the way it always was when he talked me down from my worries. But this time, there was an edge to it, a tightness around his eyes that I hadn't seen before. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. But the box, it didn't belong there. It had shown up that morning, delivered by a van I didn't recognize, and David had whisked it away before I could ask questions. I remember the rain pattering against the garage door, like tiny fingers tapping for attention. My heart pounded in my chest, a dull thud that matched the rhythm. "David, why is it so heavy? And why hide it out here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed, stepping closer, his hand reaching for mine, but I pulled back. Something in me, some deep instinct, whispered that this wasn't right. Little did I know, in just a few hours, the police would arrive, their flashlights cutting through the dim light, and they'd slice open that tape. What spilled out would shatter everything I thought I knew about the man I loved. But let me take you back. Before that night, before the doubt crept in like fog off the river, our life wasn't perfect. No one's is. But it was ours, built brick by brick over the years. We lived in a modest 2-story house on Elm Street, in a quiet suburb, where the neighbors waved and the kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. David worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown, the kind of job that kept him in suits and ties, coming home with stories about audits and spreadsheets. He was good at it, always had been. Methodical, precise, the rock I leaned on when bills piled up or decisions loomed. Me, I was a part-time librarian at the local branch, surrounded by the scent of old paper and whispered pages. It suited me, that quiet world of stories and knowledge, where I could lose myself in helping others find what they needed. Our days started early. I'd wake to the aroma of coffee brewing, David already in the kitchen, humming softly as he scrambled eggs. "Good morning, beautiful," he'd say, pressing a kiss to my forehead, his stubble tickling my skin. We'd sit at the wooden table we'd bought at a flea market years ago, scarred from family meals and homework sessions, talking about nothing and everything. Our kids, Emily and Jack, were the heart of it all. Emily, at 19, was away at college, studying art history with that wide-eyed passion only the young have. She'd call every Sunday, her voice bubbling over the phone about lectures and late-night dorm chats. Jack, our 16-year-old, was still at home, lanky and quiet, buried in video games or tinkering with his bike in the garage. He had David's eyes, deep brown, thoughtful, and my stubborn streak. Family dinners were sacred. Spaghetti on Wednesdays with garlic bread that filled the house with warmth, laughter echoing as we shared our days. David would tease Jack about his latest crush, and I'd roll my eyes, smiling, feeling that quiet contentment wrap around us like a blanket. Weekends were for simple pleasures. We'd walk the dog, Max, down to the park, his tail wagging furiously as leaves crunched under our feet. David and I would hold hands, our fingers interlaced, talking about retirement dreams, maybe a cabin by the lake where we could fish and read without the rush of city life. He'd squeeze my hand, saying, "We've got time, Sarah. Plenty of time." And I believed him. Our marriage wasn't fireworks every day. It was steady, like the ticking of the grandfather clock in our living room, handed down from my parents. We'd argue sometimes over money mostly, or whose turn it was to mow the lawn, but we always made up. A hug in the hallway, a murmured "I love you" before bed. Looking back, there were tiny craps, but I chalked them up to life's wear and tear. David had been working longer hours lately, coming home with lines etched deeper around his mouth. "Just a big client," he'd say, waving it off with a tired smile. I'd nod, pour him a glass of wine, and we'd watch TV, his head on my shoulder. The house felt full, alive, with the hum of our routines. The dishwasher rumbling after dinner, Jack's music faintly thumping from upstairs, the soft glow of lamps casting shadows on the walls. It was ordinary, but it was good. Until that first whisper of something off, like a draft slipping under a door you thought was sealed tight. It started small, as these things often do. About a month before that rainy night, I noticed David's phone buzzing more than usual. He'd glance at it during dinner, his brow furrowing, then slip it into his pocket without a word. "Work stuff," he'd mutter if I asked, changing the subject to Emily's latest artwork or Jack's school project. I didn't push. Trust had been the foundation of us for so long. But then came the late nights. He'd stay at the office until 9, 10 sometimes, the house quiet without him. When he got home, he'd smell faintly of something sharp, not cologne, but almost metallic, like ink or paper. "Overtime on an audit," he explained, kissing my cheek. I'd lie awake listening to him shower, the water running longer than usual. One afternoon, while folding laundry in our bedroom, I found a receipt crumpled in his pants pocket from a hardware store for duct tape and gloves. Odd, since he wasn't one for DIY projects. "What's this for?" I asked casually over breakfast the next day. He paused, fork midway to his mouth, then shrugged. "Just some stuff for the garage, fixing that leaky shelf." But the shelf wasn't leaky. I'd checked. A tiny knot formed in my stomach, but I untied it, telling myself I was being silly. Marriage means giving space, right? Still, I started paying attention. The way he'd lock his office door when he worked from home, the hushed phone calls in the backyard, his voice dropping when I approached. Then the delivery. A plain white van pulled up one morning as I was leaving for work. The driver, a burly man in a cap, handed David a package. No label, just that box, heavy enough that David grunted lifting it. I watched from the doorway, my keys in hand. "What's that?" I called. He turned, startled, then smiled. "Surprise for the kids, don't peek." But his eyes didn't match the smile. That night, I couldn't sleep, the rain starting its patter against the window. Something felt wrong, like a puzzle piece jammed in the wrong spot. The next day, while he was at work, I went to the garage. The box was there, tucked behind old paint cans. I touched it, my fingers tracing the tape, heart racing. What was I doing? This wasn't me. But doubt has a way of growing, doesn't it? Like weeds in a garden you thought was tended. When David came home early and caught me staring at it, that's when he said it. "You're overreacting." I stood there in the garage, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and motor oil, David's words hanging between us like a curtain I couldn't pull back. "You're overreacting," he said again, softer this time, stepping closer with that easy smile he'd always used to smooth things over. His hand grazed my arm, warm but fleeting, and for a moment, I wanted to lean into it, to let the familiarity of him wash away the unease curling in my chest. But my eyes flicked back to the box, its edges sharp under the flickering light, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was hiding inside it, something he didn't want me to see. "David," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "why is it taped up like that? If it's just a surprise, why hide it?" He let out a small laugh, the kind that used to charm me when we were dating, but now it sounded hollow, like a bell with a crack. "Sarah, come on, it's nothing. Work stuff, some old files I brought home to sort. You know how messy the office gets." He reached for the box, nudging it further behind the paint cans with his foot, casual as if he were tidying up. But his shoulders were tense, his movements too deliberate. I opened my mouth to push further, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I nodded, letting him guide me back inside, his hand on the small of my back, warm but somehow distant. That night, dinner was quiet. Jack was at a friend's house, leaving just the two of us at the table, the clink of forks against plates louder than it should have been. I watched David cut his steak, his knife moving with that accountant's precision, and I tried to see the man I'd married, the one who'd danced with me in our living room to old jazz records, who'd stayed up all night when Emily had the flu, whispering stories to keep her calm. But all I could see was the way his eyes darted to his phone when it buzzed, the way he tilted the screen away from me before typing a quick reply. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light, like I was asking about the weather. "Yeah," he said, not looking up. "Just work." The next few days, I tried to go back to normal. I shelved books at the library, the soft rustle of pages soothing my nerves. I helped Jack with his algebra homework, laughing when he groaned about useless equations. I even baked David's favorite lemon bars, the kitchen filling with the tart sweet scent, hoping the routine would anchor us again. But the box stayed in my mind, a shadow I couldn't shake. I'd catch myself glancing toward the garage when I passed the door, my fingers itching to go back, to rip it open. But I didn't. Not yet. Doubt is a funny thing. It's loud but patient, whispering just enough to keep you awake at night, staring at the ceiling while your husband snores beside you. It was Thursday when the next clue came, small but sharp, like a splinter under your skin. I was vacuuming under the couch, chasing dust bunnies, when I found a key. Not one of ours, it was too small, too ornate, with a tiny engraved number, 214. I turned it over in my hand, the metal cool against my palm, and felt that knot in my stomach tighten. David was at work, so I slipped the key into my pocket, telling myself it was nothing. A locker key from his gym, maybe? Or something from his office. But when I asked him about it that evening, holding it out in my palm like an offering, his face changed. Just for a second, but I saw it. A flicker as something like fear, before the smile snapped back into place. "Oh, that? Must have fallen out of my work bag. It's for a file cabinet at the office." He took it, his fingers brushing mine, and slipped it into his pocket. "Thanks, honey." I wanted to believe him. I did. But that night, I lay awake listening to the rain start again, a soft patter that felt like it was tapping out a warning. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I checked his phone. He'd left it on the kitchen counter while he showered, the screen dark but unlocked. My hands shook as I swiped through, guilt clawing at me. There were texts, dozens of them, from a number with no name. "Drop off tomorrow, 7 a.m. Make sure it's sealed tight. Don't be late." My heart pounded so loud I thought it would wake the house. I scrolled further, but the earlier messages were deleted, leaving only fragments. I put the phone down, my breath shallow, and told myself it was work. It had to be work. But then Friday came, and with it another delivery. I was home, sorting library returns, when the same white van pulled up. This time, I watched from the living room window, hidden behind the curtain. The driver handed David another box, smaller, but just as heavily taped. David glanced around, his eyes sweeping the street, before carrying it to the garage. I waited until he left for work, then went there. The first box was still there, untouched, but now the second one sat beside it, both of them like silent sentinels. I reached for the smaller one, my fingers brushing the tape, but I stopped. What was I afraid of? What was I hoping to find? I didn't open it. Instead, I called Emily, needing her voice to ground me. "Mom, you sound weird," she said, her tone half teasing, half concerned. I laughed it off, asking about her classes, but my mind was elsewhere. When I hung up, I sat on the couch, the house too quiet, the ticking of the grandfather clock like a heartbeat. I thought about confronting David, but what would I say? "Why are you getting strange boxes?" It sounded ridiculous, even to me. So I waited, watching, the doubt growing roots. By Thursday, I couldn't stand it anymore. I told David I was running errands, but instead I drove to his office, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered under the gray sky. I sat there, watching the building, waiting for I don't know what. That's when I saw the van again, pulling around the back. David stepped out, shaking hands with the driver, and they carried another box inside. My heart sank, heavy as the rain clouds above. I drove home, my mind racing, trying to piece it together. Was it money? Drugs? Something worse? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, I confronted him. We were in the kitchen, the dishes still in the sink, the air smelling faintly of garlic from dinner. "David," I said, my voice trembling, "what's in those boxes?" He froze, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. "Sarah, we've been over this. It's nothing to worry about." But his voice was tight, his eyes avoiding mine. I pushed, my words spilling out. "I saw you today, at the office, with that van. What are you hiding?" His face hardened, just for a moment before softening again. "You followed me?" he asked, almost hurt. "Sarah, you're overreacting. It's just work." But I wasn't, and by Monday when the police knocked on our door, their faces grim as they headed for the garage, I knew I'd been right to listen to that whisper. The weekend dragged on after that confrontation, the air in our house thick with unspoken words. David was quieter than usual, his smiles forced, his touches brief. I moved through the motions, grocery shopping where the fluorescent lights buzzed like my thoughts, folding laundry, the fabric softener scent clinging to my hands like a false comfort. Jack noticed, asking over breakfast if everything was okay, his young face creased with worry. "Just tired, sweetie," I said, ruffling his hair. But inside, I was unraveling, thread by thread. Monday morning came with a deceptive normalcy. David left for work with a quick kiss, his lunch bag in hand, the door clicking shut behind him like a period at the end of a sentence. I waved from the window, watching his car back out of the driveway, the exhaust puffing in the cool air. Then I headed to the library, losing myself in the stacks, the quiet hush a balm. But by afternoon, the doubt had bloomed into something sharper, fear maybe, or resolve. I left work early, telling my boss I had a headache, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Back home, the house felt empty, the grandfather clock ticking louder than ever. I went straight to the garage, the door creaking as I pushed it open. The boxes were still there, side by side, mocking me with their silence. My heart hammered as I knelt down, fingers trembling on the tape of the smaller one. I peeled it back slowly, the rip echoing like thunder in the quiet space. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, were stacks of papers, documents, receipts, all stamped with company letterheads I didn't recognize. But then, deeper, something cold and metallic, a hard drive, unlabeled, and beside it a bundle of cash, crisp $100 bills bound with rubber bands. My breath caught. This wasn't work files. This was something else. I ripped open the larger box next, my hands moving on their own now. More cash, thousands maybe, and flash drives, dozens of them, tucked into foam padding. At the bottom, a ledger, handwritten entries, dates and amounts, names I didn't know, embezzlement, fraud? My mind raced, piecing together the late nights, the hushed calls, the key.
That key, maybe to a safe deposit box? I sat back on my heels, the concrete cold through my jeans, staring at the contents spilled around me like secrets finally freed. How long had this been going on? Who was the real David? I didn't hear the doorbell at first, lost in the whirl of thoughts. But then it rang again, insistent. I shoved everything back into the boxes as best I could, tape hanging loose, and hurried to the door. 2 police officers stood on the porch, their uniforms stark against the overcast sky, badges glinting. "Mrs. Sarah Thompson?" the taller one asked, his voice even but firm. I nodded, my mouth dry. "We're here about your husband, David. May we come in?"
They sat at our kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared so many meals, now feeling like a courtroom. The older officer, with salt and pepper hair, explained it carefully, his words measured. "We've been investigating financial irregularities at David's firm. Embezzlement, money laundering. We have reason to believe he's involved." My stomach dropped, the room tilting. What? No, that can't be. But even as I said it, the boxes in the garage loomed in my mind. They asked questions about his work, his habits, any unusual activity. I answered numbly, my voice distant, like it belonged to someone else. Then came the search warrant. They produced it, a crisp paper that changed everything. "We need to check the premises," the younger officer said, almost apologetic. I led them to the garage, my legs heavy, the air smelling of oil and betrayal. They opened the boxes methodically, gloved hands pulling out the contents, laying them on the workbench under the buzzing light. Cash, drives, ledgers, all of it evidence, they said. "This matches what we've been tracking," the tall one murmured, bagging items. I leaned against the wall, the rough bricks biting into my back, watching my life unpack before strangers. David arrived home an hour later, his car pulling in just as the police were loading the boxes into their vehicle. He froze in the driveway, his face paling under the streetlight's glow. "Sarah, what's going on?" His voice cracked, the first real emotion I'd heard from him in days. The officers approached him, reading rights, the words blurring in my ears. He looked at me, eyes wide with plea. "Sarah, I can explain. It's not what it looks like." We ended up in the living room, David on the couch, officers flanking him, me in the armchair across, feeling miles away. It started small, he confessed, his head bowed, hands clasped tight. A client needed help cooking the books, just a little. The money was good, great, even. For us, for the kids' college, retirement. His voice broke. I thought I could stop, but it snowballed. The boxes, deliveries from associates, to hide the trail. I stared at him, the man I'd shared a bed with, raised children with. "You lied to me. For how long?" He met my eyes, tears in his. 2 years. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't want you involved." The confrontation spilled out then, raw and unfiltered. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice rising despite myself. "Our home, our family, you risked everything for what? Greed?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I was scared. The firm was downsizing. I thought we'd lose the house. I did it for us. But his words rang hollow, excuses wrapped in regret. The officers watched, silent witnesses, as years of trust crumbled. I felt shock give way to heartbreak, a deep ache in my chest like something vital had been torn out. They took him away that night, handcuffs clicking softly, his shoulders slumped as he glanced back at me from the squad car. "I love you," he mouthed through the window. I turned away, the rain starting again, blurring the world outside. Alone in the house, I sank to the floor, the carpet rough under my palms, sobs shaking me. How had I missed it? The signs were there. The phone, the key, the boxes. But love blinds you, doesn't it? Makes you see what you want.
The days after David's arrest blurred into a haze of paperwork and hushed conversations. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Carla, with kind eyes behind her glasses, who explained the charges in plain terms: embezzlement, fraud, money laundering. David had been skimming from clients, funneling funds through shell accounts, the boxes part of a drop-off system to avoid digital trails. He could face 5 to 10 years, she said over coffee, in our kitchen, the steam rising like ghosts between us. I nodded, stirring my mug endlessly, the spoon clinking against the ceramic. How do you process that? The man who read bedtime stories to our kids, who held my hand through my mother's funeral, now a criminal? I visited him at the county jail 2 days later, the air thick with disinfectant and despair. He sat behind the glass partition, his orange jumpsuit ill-fitting, stubble shadowing his jaw. "Sarah," he said through the phone receiver, his voice tinny, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to touch you." His eyes, those deep brown ones I'd fallen for, were red-rimmed. I pressed my hand to the glass, feeling the cold barrier. "Why, David? We had enough. We were happy." He leaned forward, forehead almost touching. "I got greedy, scared about the future. Jack's tuition, Emily's loans. One bad decision led to another." We talked for the allotted 20 minutes, a mix of tears and regrets, but no real answers. As I left, the clang of the door behind me felt final, like closing a chapter. Back home, I threw myself into action. First, the finances. Our accounts were frozen, so I dug into savings I'd kept separate, a small nest egg from my parents' inheritance. I called the bank, my voice steady, as I transferred what I could, paying bills that had piled up like accusations on the counter. Then the kids. Emily came home that weekend, her duffel bag thumping on the porch as she hugged me tight, her shampoo scent familiar and grounding. "We'll get through this, Mom," she whispered, though her eyes were puffy from crying on the drive. Jack withdrew at first, spending hours in his room, but I coaxed him out with pizza and old photo albums, flipping through pages of happier times, beach vacations, birthday cakes, David's goofy grin behind the camera. I investigated further, needing to understand the full scope. Carla helped me access some records, and I pored over them at the kitchen table late at night, the lamp casting a pool of light on spreadsheets and statements. Names jumped out. Associates at the firm, a shady vendor David had mentioned in passing. One evening, I drove to the office after hours, the building dark except for a few lit windows. I met with his boss, Mr. Harlan, a portly man with a weary sigh. "We suspected something," he admitted in his cluttered office, the air smelling of stale coffee. "Audits showed discrepancies. We tipped off the authorities." I nodded, clutching my purse. Did he act alone? Harlan shook his head. "No, but he was key. We're cooperating fully." Confrontation came next, not just with David, but with myself. I lay awake, replaying moments, the receipt, the key, the texts. Why hadn't I pushed sooner? Guilt gnawed at me, but Carla's words echoed. "You couldn't have known. Trust isn't blindness. It's human." I started therapy, a quiet office downtown where I unpacked the layers, betrayal's sting, anger's heat, the quiet grief for what was lost. "What now?" I asked the therapist, twisting a tissue in my hands. She said, "You rebuild, one step at a time." Action felt like armor. I filed for divorce, the papers heavy in my hands. As I signed them, the pens scratched loud in the lawyer's office. Not out of spite, but necessity. Protecting assets, shielding the kids. David didn't fight it. From jail, he agreed, his letter arriving folded neatly. "I understand. I love you enough to let go." Reading it, tears blurred the ink, but I folded it away, focusing forward. I took on more hours at the library, the routine a lifeline, organizing shelves, recommending books, the patron's smiles a small warmth. One afternoon, I confronted one of his associates, a man named Rick whose name appeared in the ledger. I found his address online, drove there unannounced, my heart pounding as I knocked on his door. He answered, surprise flashing across his face, a slick guy in his 40s, polar shirt tucked neatly. "Sarah, what?" I cut him off, voice firm. "You knew. You helped him." We talked on his porch, the neighborhood quiet around us. "It was just business," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "David approached me." But his eyes darted, and I pressed. "The police know. Tell them everything." He nodded reluctantly, and later Carla confirmed he'd turned state evidence, lightening David's potential sentence, but exposing the web. Through it all, dialogue with the kids anchored me. Over dinner one night, simple grilled cheese, the bread toasting golden, Emily asked, "Do you hate him, Mom?" I paused, knife in hand. "No, I hate what he did, but he's still your dad." Jack chimed in, voice soft. "Will we visit him?" I said, "If you want." I squeezed his hand. Their questions came in waves. Why? How? What next? And I answered honestly, no sugarcoating, building trust anew. By week's end, I felt a shift, not peace, but purpose. I cleared the garage, donating old tools, the space echoing empty but clean. As rain pattered outside again, I sat with a cup of tea, steam curling, planning. More work, maybe classes for a certification, a future on my terms. Betrayal had cracked us, but I wouldn't let it define us. Word spread like wildfire in our small suburb, the kind of place where news travels faster than the morning paper. It started with whispers, a neighbor's sidelong glance as I walked Max, the dog's leash taut in my hand, his paws patting softly on the sidewalk. Then the calls came, tentative at first. "Sarah, we heard, is it true?" Old friends from church, colleagues from the library, even Emily's high school teacher. I answered politely, my voice even. "Yes, it's true. We're managing." But inside, the exposure felt like standing naked in a storm, every eye a raindrop stinging my skin. The firm made it public first, a press release buried in the local business section, but amplified by gossip. Accounting firm uncovers internal fraud. Employee arrested. No names, but everyone knew. David's photo appeared online, a grainy shot from his LinkedIn, looking professional and distant. I avoided the comments, but Emily showed me one evening, her laptop screen glowing in the dim living room. "Mom, look, people are saying awful things." I scanned the vitriol. Greedy thief. How could he? It hurt, a fresh wound, but I closed the lid gently. Let them talk. We know the truth.
Family was harder. David's sister, Marlene, called from across state, her voice sharp over the line. "Sarah, what happened? David would never—" I explained what I could. The embezzlement's web. His confession. She cried, then grew quiet. "We'll support him, but you take care of yourself." It was dignified. No blame flung my way. But the divide was there. A crack in the family foundation. My own brother flew in, his hug enveloping me at the airport, the scent of his aftershave familiar from childhood. "I'm here," he said simply. And he was. Helping with paperwork, fixing the leaky faucet David had ignored. His presence a steady anchor. At work, the library became a mixed refuge. Patrons whispered as I checked out books, their eyes curious, but kind. My boss pulled me aside one morning, the office smelling of fresh coffee and ink. "Sarah, if you need time off—" I shook my head. Works helps. But consequences rippled. A promotion I'd been eyeing went to someone else, unspoken concerns about association. I didn't fight it. Dignity meant picking battles. Instead, I volunteered for story hour.
reading to kids, their wide eyes and laughter a balm against the judgment outside. The community felt the weight too. Our church group organized a meal train, casseroles arriving on the porch with notes, "Thinking of you." It was kind, but laced with pity. The dishes warm, but the gestures cooling the air. One evening, at a neighborhood barbecue I'd almost skipped, a friend cornered me by the grill, smoke curling up. "Sarah, we're shocked. David seemed so normal." I nodded, sipping lemonade, its tartness matching my mood. He is normal. People make mistakes. No vindictiveness from me, just truth, letting the moral sink in. Greed erodes from within, no matter the facade. David faced his own reckonings. In court for the arraignment, I sat in the back, the wooden bench hard under me, the room echoing with legalese. He pleaded guilty, his voice steady but low, avoiding my eyes. The judge, stern-faced, outlined the fallout. Restitution, fines, prison time pending, sentencing. Outside, reporters hovered, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Thompson, any comment?" He shook his head, escorted away. But the story hit the evening news. A segment on white-collar crime. His face pixelated, but recognizable. Friends distanced themselves. Old golf buddies canceled plans. His social circle shrinking like a deflating balloon. Jack felt it at school. Whispers in hallways. A teammate's jab during practice. He came home one day, backpack slung low, face flushed. They called Dad a crook. We talked on the couch, my arm around him, the fabric soft from years of use. "It's not fair," he said, voice cracking. "But we hold our heads high," I replied. "Your dad's actions don't define you." Emily dealt with it online, unfollowing accounts that gossiped. Her posts turned to art, sketches of resilience, captions about growth. Their strength mirrored mine, a quiet justice in our unity. The antagonist, David, though it pained me to think of him that way, faced moral consequences beyond legal. Letters from victims arrived via lawyers. A small business owner who'd lost savings. A retiree scammed. "Your greed cost me my home," one read. He shared them in a jail visit, his hands clasped on the table. "I see now," he said, eyes downcast. "The hurt I caused." No cruelty from me. I listened, nodded. "Make it right," I said softly. He volunteered for prison programs, teaching finance classes, a small step toward redemption. As weeks passed, the buzz faded, replaced by normalcy's hum. Neighbors waved again, without the pity. Work stabilized. A patron thanked me for a book recommendation, her smile genuine. Justice wasn't cruel. It was the quiet unraveling of deception. The community healing around the scar. We emerged stronger. Lessons etched deep. Trust is fragile, but integrity rebuilds. Months turned the sharp edges of pain into something softer, more manageable, like a stone smoothed by a river's flow. The divorce finalized quietly. Papers signed in Carla's office, the air conditioned and sterile, a far cry from the warmth of our wedding day. I kept the house, for the kids, for stability. Selling off some furniture to cover costs, the empty spaces echoing at first, but soon feeling like room to breathe. David got 3 years. A plea deal for cooperation. His letters from prison arriving sporadically, filled with remorse and updates on his classes. "I'm learning, Sarah. About myself, about choices." I replied sparingly, words measured, focusing on the kids' news rather than us. Healing came in layers, slow and deliberate. I started with the house, repainting the living room a soft blue, the roller brushing away old memories with each stroke. The scent of fresh paint mingled with coffee as Emily helped, her laughter filling the space when she splattered dots on my shirt. "New beginnings!" "Mom," she said, hugging me sideways. Jack joined in, his teenage awkwardness giving way to quiet talks on the porch swing, the chains creaking under us as stars pricked the night sky. "I miss Dad," he admitted one evening, voice muffled. "Me too," I said honestly. "But we're okay. We'll visit when you're ready." He nodded, leaning his head on my shoulder, the weight familiar and grounding. Work became a cornerstone. The library promoted me, after all, to head of community programs, my ideas for book clubs and workshops taking root. I organized a series on financial literacy, ironic, perhaps, but born from experience. Patrons shared stories over tea, their vulnerabilities mirroring mine, forging connections in the quiet aisles. One woman, recently widowed, confided her fears. I listened, offering resources, feeling strength in helping others navigate storms I'd weathered. Friendships deepened too. My brother stayed a week, then another, his visits becoming regular. We cooked family recipes, Mom's lasagna, layers of cheese and sauce bubbling in the oven, reminiscing without the shadow of betrayal. Church group evolved from pity to partnership. I led a support circle for those facing loss, the room warm with shared candles and stories. Marlene visited once, awkward at first, but we talked over pie in the kitchen, crumb scattering as we found common ground in loving David, despite his flaws. "He's paying the price," she said softly. "And so are we," I replied. No bitterness, just truth.
Personal growth bloomed quietly. Therapy continued, sessions peeling back layers, forgiveness not as erasure but release. "You don't have to forget," my therapist said, notepad in lap. "Just carry it lighter." I took walks alone, Max trotting beside me, leaves crunching underfoot, the air crisp with autumn's promise. I journaled by the window, words flowing like the river nearby, reflecting on trust's fragility and resilience's quiet power. One entry: "Betrayal taught me to see myself clearly, not as half of a whole, but whole on my own." The kids thrived in their ways. Emily returned to college with renewed focus, her art darker at first, abstracts of shattered glass, then lighter, vibrant with hope. She called weekly, voice bright. "I iced my exam, Mom. Thanks for the pep talk." Jack joined a robotics club, his hands busy with circuits and code, channeling energy into creation. We celebrated small wins, a straight-A report card, a gallery showing, with homemade cake, the kitchen filled with sugar's sweet scent and our laughter. Forgiveness crept in unexpectedly. During a prison visit 6 months in, David looked thinner, but his eyes clearer. We talked through the glass. No pleas this time, just life. "I'm proud of you," he said, voice steady, "the way you're handling this." I nodded, a weight lifting. "I forgive you, David. For me, for the kids." Not reconciliation, but closure, allowing peace to settle. He smiled faintly, and as I left, the door's clang felt less like an end, more like a turn in the path. New beginnings hinted at horizons. I dated tentatively, a coffee with a widower from church, conversation easy over steaming mugs, no pressure. But mostly I savored solitude, reading late with a blanket draped over me, the grandfather clock ticking companionably. The moral lingered. Deception destroys, but truth rebuilds. Strength isn't in avoiding falls, but rising, scarred but wiser. As the year turned, our home felt full again, not with what was lost, but what we'd gained: resilience, deeper bonds, a quiet empowerment. Life moved forward steady as the river, carrying us towards calmer waters. Looking back now, with the clarity that time gifts us, I see how healing isn't a straight path, but a winding one, full of unexpected turns and quiet revelations. It began in earnest after David's sentencing, when the courtroom doors closed behind him and I stepped into the sunlight, the warmth on my face feeling like a promise. The house, once a shared sanctuary, became my canvas for renewal. I rearranged furniture, the scrape of legs on hardwood echoing my resolve to reshape our space. Emily suggested plants, ferns and succulents that thrived in the windowsills, their green leaves unfurling like hope. "Life finds a way," she said, watering them with me, droplets beating on the soil.
I dove deeper into therapy, sessions becoming a ritual, like brewing tea on a chilly morning. My therapist office, with its soft lamp glow and tissue box always at hand, was where I unpacked the remnants of betrayal. "What do you want now, Sarah?" she asked one rainy afternoon, the drops tracing paths down the window. I paused, stirring my herbal tea, the steam carrying notes of chamomile. I said finally, "Peace, and to trust myself again." We worked on boundaries, on recognizing red flags, not with paranoia, but wisdom. Journaling helped too. Nights by the fire, pen scratching paper, pouring out fears until they lost their power. The kids were my compass. Emily graduated that spring, her cap tassel swinging as she crossed the stage, her smile wide under the auditorium lights. We celebrated with a picnic in the park. Blankets spread on grass still damp from morning dew, sandwiches and laughter shared. Dad sent a card, she confided later, handing me the envelope. Inside, his handwriting, "Proud of you, kiddo." I felt a pang, but no anger, just acceptance. Jack hit a growth spurt, both in height and confidence, his robotics team winning regionals. I cheered from the stands, the buzz of excitement matching my pride, his hug afterwards sweaty and genuine. "Thanks for being here, Mom." We visited David once together, the drive long and reflective, radio playing soft tunes. In the visiting room, conversations flowed easier, about school, art, future dreams. No illusions of reunion, but a thread of family intact. Work flourished into purpose. My financial literacy workshops drew crowds, the library's community room filled with attentive faces, notebooks open. I shared anonymized lessons from our ordeal, warning signs of fraud, the importance of separate accounts. My voice steady, empowered by survival. One participant, a young mother, approached after. "Your story helped me spot issues in my marriage." Her gratitude warmed me more than applause. I pursued certification online, late-night studies with coffee steaming beside my laptop, the screen's glow illuminating paths I hadn't considered before. Promotion followed, to director, the title feeling earned, not given. Socially, I branched out. A book club formed with library friends, evenings of wine and discretion, pages turning under lamplight. Laughter returned, genuine and freeing over shared plots and personal asides. Dating entered tentatively, a dinner with the widower, Mark, from church. We walked after, streetlights casting long shadows, talking of losses and laughs. No rush, just companionship. His hand brushing mine sent a spark I hadn't felt in years. "You're strong," he said softly. I believed it.
Forgiveness solidified during a solo trip, a weekend at the lake cabin we'd once dreamed of, now rented for solitude. I sat on the dock, feet dangling in cool water, watching sunsets paint the sky in oranges and pinks. Memories surfaced, good ones, of David's humor, his support through my job loss years ago. I released the bad like pebbles into the lake, ripples spreading, then calming. A letter to him followed. "I forgive you fully. Be well." His reply came weeks later. "Thank you. You've always been the better of us." The moral woven through it all. Betrayal tests us, but it also reveals our core. Greed may tempt, but integrity endures. I emerged not bitter, but enriched. Stronger in solitude, deeper in connections. Life's not about avoiding storms, but dancing in the rain, umbrella optional. As seasons shifted, our home hummed with new rhythm. Meals experimented with, music playing, doors open to friends. Peace settled, warm as a quilt, wrapping us in possibility. We'd healed, not to forget, but to move forward. Lessons carried like treasures. Sitting here now in the quiet of my living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows on the walls, I feel the weight of the journey settle into something lighter, like a book finally finding its place on the shelf. The grandfather clock ticks steadily, a reminder of time's persistence, and the ferns in the window catch the evening light, their leaves a quiet promise of growth. I think about David, about the boxes that unraveled our life, and about the strength it took to rebuild,
Not just for me, but for Emily and Jack, for the family we still are in our own way. It's funny how betrayal can break you open only to show you the resilience you didn't know you had. I've learned that trust, once shattered, doesn't have to stay broken. It's like mending a quilt. Stitch by stitch, it comes together, stronger in the seams. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the hurt. It's about choosing to carry it differently, to let it teach rather than define. I look at my kids, their laughter filling the house again, and I know we're more than the mistakes that tried to undo us. We're the mornings spent baking, the late night talks, the small victories that feel like miracles. Life doesn't hand you perfect endings, but it gives you beginnings if you're brave enough to take them. So I ask you, sitting there, maybe with a cup of tea or the hum of your own life around you, what would you have done? When doubt whispered, would you have opened the box or let it stay closed? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your story because we're all writing one, aren't we? If this touched you, hit that subscribe button. Join our little community here at Voices of Auntie May. We're all about finding light in the shadows, together. Thank you for listening, for being here. Until next time, hold your loved ones close and trust the strength within you.